Welcome to Jane Jackson Careers, a podcast to inspire you to take your career to the next level. In this podcast, I chat with amazing professionals who are leaders in their field and find out what's made them a success. Many of them have successfully made changes in their careers. They may have changed industry, changed job function, made big city or country moves, or taken the huge leap into entrepreneurship. I also share practical and actionable career tips for those who want to explore what to do next in their career and aren't sure about what steps to take to get moving. Subscribe to this podcast for regular updates or visit me at janejacksoncoach.com.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas introducing Jane Jackson Careers, a podcast that will inspire you to take control of your career and your life. Here's your host, Jane Jackson, career management coach and author of Navigating Career Crossroads. Be prepared to ignite.
Well, hello and welcome to my Careers podcast, where I interview inspiring professionals who have made fascinating career changes. I am thrilled to have on the show today Ronsley Vaz. Now, Ronsley is a rebel entrepreneur specializing in creating businesses that connect people and ideas through non-traditional mediums. He's the celebrated host of Australia's #1 food podcast, Bond Appetit, and the host of Podcast Revolution. Ronsley is also a software technical expert and a personal chef. He specializes in creating connections between people using food as a social lubricant and operates a personal chef business called Bond Appetit that connects people with chefs in the comfort of their homes. He's a serial ideas creator, which is evident in his numerous successful businesses and charities, and Ronsley is the co-founder of a social enterprise called Eat for Two, funded by the personal chef business where every meal they prepare in Australia feeds a child or a person in need in India. Now, I'm delighted to welcome this busy man to the show, and good morning, Ronsley.
Hey, Jane, how's it going?
Really
Thanks for
good.
having me. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, I'm thrilled because you've got such a beautiful voice and you do so many really exciting things. And I'm just looking forward to hearing all about your career journey and how you ended up becoming the successful entrepreneur that you are today. But to kick us off, how about let's find out about the young Ronsley and your career dreams when you were a little boy or when you were a young teenager.
Ronsley, when he was a young boy, all he wanted to do was be Batman. True story. That's
Batman.
True. Yeah, that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I still have sometimes I think about that and I still want to do it, but I know how rich you got to be, I suppose, to be Bruce Wayne, and my wife wouldn't allow me to have a whole bunch of women around my shoulder. So
I bet, Ronsley, all you wanted was the Batmobile. That's the thing, the Batmobile and the mask.
Well, I think the Batmobile is cool, but I think the Batplane is even better.
Oh yeah, I'd like one of those too.
Yes.
Okay, so you wanted to be Batman. Then what happened?
Well, then what happened? To be honest, let's be serious for a second. I wanted to be a pilot. That was my dream going through school. And what happened was very early on, I realized that I needed glasses because I was on the computer a lot. So, because I was on the computer a lot, I was like, well, I can't become a pilot. Let's just get into computers. And I knew that from, I think it was year 8 that I made that decision that I was going to get into computers and be some sort of an engineer, not sure what way it would take me. And I kind of pursued that path and became a computer engineer.
And then how long were you a computer engineer and did you enjoy it?
I loved it. I loved it. I still love it today if I do get into it. And it does help having that background because everything now is run on computers. So having that as a background really makes life easier, I suppose. I loved it. I didn't really enjoy working in India. There was a lot of, I suppose the difference was that in India, it's very, this is how you do it. Don't ask questions, just do it. And I just couldn't function there. It was just not something that gelled with me. So I decided that after working for a year in India that I wanted to get out, and I came to Australia. I did my master's in software engineering at Griffith University in Brisbane, and worked for a really, really cool company called Beeline Technologies that were programming tractors and airplanes and defense vehicles to wake up in the morning and automate themselves and just drive themselves and sort of park themselves and do everything automatically. And it was really cool to be part of that company. I did that for, I don't know, I think over 10 or 11 years maybe, all up. They paid for an MBA, which got me to see another side of the world. Yeah, and that's where that's where I was at.
Yeah. So your MBA, where did you take that? Was that in Australia or elsewhere?
No, it was in Australia. It was at QUT, and what happened was that Beeline Technologies got bought over by a company on the Canadian Stock Exchange, and we turned into Hemisphere GPS. So I suddenly started traveling to the States and to Canada as part of my job, and I was leading a bunch of people, and that was kind of cool, I suppose. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur then, but going into the MBA, I suddenly saw things that I never noticed before. So that was interesting.
So you became more of a businessman rather than a technician, because now what I'm really curious about is how did you make that shift from software engineer and the IT technical side of things into food, which is such a big thing in your life now?
Yeah, well, there was a jump in between as well. So I actually got offered a really good opportunity when I was just at the point, at the pinnacle of my software engineering or software management sort of career. There was a guy that offered me a financial advising job, and I said to him, I said, "Hey, John, I have no idea what financial advising even means." And he's like, "Oh, don't worry, I just need you to run my Brisbane office." And he paid for a financial advising course, and I ran his business for a couple of years. And in that time, I realized a couple of things. One was I wasn't cut out for financial advising. It was too cutthroat an industry for me. And two, everyone kept asking me where I was from and why I was so different from the rest of the other Indians they met. And I was trying to explain to them how Goa is so different, the food is different, the Portuguese influence is different. And I thought, well, what better way to do that than to expose people to the kind of food, because it's very different to Indian food in general. So that's why I got into food.
Now I didn't realize that Goan food is very different from Indian food, but I would imagine, yeah, if you've got that strong Portuguese influence, then all the spices would be quite different too.
Well, Indian food is very different. So Indian food changes every 200 Ks in India. And what we see is a very merged, bastardized version of Indian food where we see it in, I suppose, other parts of the world. So what Goan food in particular is so different because the Portuguese brought chilies and those kind of spices to India. Before that, India didn't even have chilies. So because of the trade between South America and India, and Goa in particular, that's how chilies came to India. Now India is the largest producer of chilies. So there's a lot of influences that the Portuguese brought to India, which stayed within Goa in particular. And because Goa is on that coastal line, we use a lot of coconut in our food, which kind of compares it a little bit to the Thai cuisine. So that's why it's a bit different. Not a bit different. It's actually very different from Indian food in general.
That sounds really yummy. Lots of chilies and coconut. Exactly what I love. Makes me think of laksa. But obviously that's more of Malaysian, Singaporean food. But fascinating. So then you went from IT software engineer to financial advisor, which is a huge jump, which actually shows, I like it the way that, you know, in your introduction, you call yourself a rebel entrepreneur. Sounds like you were a rebel right from a very young age anyway, Ronsley. Yeah. Okay, so IT software engineering, financial advice, and then going into food, because obviously you have this great love of food and sharing and teaching people about probably the history of food as well. And then tell me, how did things evolve?
Well, I opened a restaurant, so I was always the guy that was invited to the barbecues or the parties just so that I could cook. So I was always the cook, right? I didn't really have much in terms of a chef degree, or I didn't train to be a chef, but I wanted to bring all these different influences to Australia, which I knew that Australia didn't see. So I opened a restaurant. It was the merging of Indian spices and Portuguese flavors. And I created this menu that was very different. You wouldn't get that menu in Goa. You wouldn't get that menu anywhere on the planet. So it was definitely something that you would never have experienced before. With that came a whole bunch of challenges, I suppose. It was my first business. It was very traditional. There was a lot of things I didn't know. There was a lot of risk. The biggest thing, I suppose, that worked to my advantage was me going in with about just over $200,000 of my money. So I suppose if that was all borrowed, there would have been the later story is going to be quite devastating. So 3.5 years down the line, there was one day we did service on a Saturday night, and on the Sunday the locks were changed, and I pretty much had to walk away from the business overnight. So that was a big learning curve for me. That was a huge sort of setback in the sense that I wasn't really ready to go through something like that. But I had to pick myself up and get on with life, and that's when I started the food business, Bond Appetit.
Wow, you're such a brave businessman you are, because opening a restaurant and running a restaurant, yeah, you're right. I think without the experience behind you or someone to guide as a mentor, it must be so complicated. All I know about running a restaurant is watching Gordon Ramsay on TV. and with all those Gordon Ramsay restaurant disasters, it's pretty tough, isn't it? So that must have really been like a lot of hurt in your heart when you had to close the doors. But then, okay, so then you started Bond Appetit. Tell me lots about that.
Well, Bond Appetit, as part of having the restaurant, the things that were really glaring in the face was how difficult it was to have a fresh food restaurant. What in Australia we have is our highest bill is the wage bill. So I understand how restaurants cut corners by having processed food, pre-cut food, pre-crumbed food in restaurants, because it is very difficult to make ends meet. We struggled right from the start to the end, even though we had a full restaurant. We used to have full restaurants all the time. It was just difficult to make all the numbers add up, because when you buy fresh food in Australia, you don't pay any tax, so there's no GST on it. But when you sell it, you add 10% on that, so that's a cost. Then when you buy fresh food, you got to prep it, so you got to pay staff wages, which is quite high in Australia, to prepare it in the way that you need it to be prepared. As opposed to if you take the flip option to that and just have everything come in a box, it's a lot easier. It takes away a lot of the cost involved. So one of the glaring problems that we had, or that I noticed, was that there was a lot of food that was not really food. There were chemicals that came in a bag disguised as food, and we were consuming it going, yeah, this is the best I can do. And everyone wanted to eat healthy. Everyone wanted to eat right, but the definition and how skewed that version was just very, very obvious. So I was sitting at a food court at Garden City, which is, here in Brisbane, and I was noticing all these kids finishing school that were exchanging coupons for a bunch of nuggets from a KFC and from a McDonald's. And I was like, it looked really bad, but what looked even worse was that they couldn't even make it to the table without panting. And I wanted to affect change in the way Australia saw food, especially the kids. because our childhood influences are so important to how we see food and how we see comfort food in particular. So that's why Bond Appetit started, and I wanted to be able to cook for people that would set the example for the children to follow.
Oh, what a brilliant idea. You're right. I mean, young children growing up, they always take that easy option, and they love the fried food or anything that's easy or too very, very sugary or high fat content because it tastes good, but it's not so good for you. So
I suppose they don't know any better, Jane. Yeah. I mean, it's the influence, right? If that's the easiest option and that's what is put in front of them, then that's what their taste buds are tuned to crave.
And so how do you actually educate the children? And obviously you'll need to educate their parents as well. What is it that you do to affect this change, Ronsley?
Well, the way I saw it was that I couldn't directly cook for the kids because they wouldn't be able to pay. It wouldn't be sustainable. There would be nothing to back what I could do. So I wanted to cook for the high achieving entrepreneurs or professionals or performers around that knew that they had to eat healthy. They knew that that was their challenge. They knew that what they put into their body would be what they got out of their day. So if I cooked for them, then they would set the example and they would help me set the credibility to later on go into schools and do the teaching, I suppose, to the kids.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea. So you had a plan. Start at the top and let it all filter down. Really smart move.
That was the plan.
Yeah. And so now how's the business going now?
It's going well. We're constantly looking to expand, and I suppose scalability is something that right now is our biggest challenge. We have quite a lot of clients on board. We have a few chefs on board. Right now, it's, I suppose, administering the working between the two is our challenge. So when we figure that out, I suppose scalability will be the next step. And then again, every meal we prepare here in Australia, we feed a child or an old person in need in a third world country. And again, that has had to be scaled because we couldn't even manage that through our charity. So we've partnered with B1G1 now for the excess that we aren't able to do through Eat for Two.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So tell me a little bit more about Eat for Two and how that works and the partnership with B1G1, because not everyone will know what B1G1 is. So tell us about that too.
Right. So to be honest, I don't know what happened. There was one day that I woke up with this idea that it's a bit stupid that we have hunger and obesity on the same planet. And it consumed me for a couple of days before I decided to do something about it. And I booked my ticket. I flew to India, and in 3 weeks I set up a charity. Again, I don't know how that happened. It happened pretty quick. It happened really, really quickly. And the thing that I realized the most, or rather we realized the most, my wife and me, was that when we were there, our plan was purely to kind of give food to the kids. It was just kids at the time. But when we went to our first share session, we realized that while the kids appreciated the food, they were lacking something that we all take for granted. They were lacking love. And it was so obvious that they were lacking love that there was a queue to give my wife hugs. And this was before food, right? So it wasn't like we could just go ahead and just drop the food off anymore. We had to do something a bit different. And we have a bunch of volunteers in India that go and share meals now with the kids and now old people. And since then, it's evolved to taking the children from orphanage homes to old age homes, because in India there are old aged homes as well, which pretty much the old age that are abandoned like the kids. So we get them to interact with each other, which everyone loves, and they all share a meal together. But because of the scalability of Bond Appetit, we've had to partner with Buy One, Give One. And I suppose for anyone listening, B1G1 is the easiest way for you to create an impact with what you do through your business. So you can do anything from providing, water for a village, to education, to feeding kids or old people, or providing eyesight as well. So any project that you have in mind, you can do that through B1G1 through your business.
Wow, what a beautiful concept. Fantastic, of course, to give back to the community, but I really like this, partnering with the children and those in old age homes, because everyone needs the love, and this concept of providing hugs as well is fantastic, because the kids would feel probably unloved and many would be orphans. The old people sometimes feel rejected. And what a great concept. Brilliant, Ronsley. I love that. Really,
Thank
really
you.
love it.
I want to say that it wasn't something that just popped in my head. It was just what the kids taught us and what the old people taught us was way more than what we can ever provide them. So we knew that getting them together was just something that would benefit them both. And again, things that we take for granted in our flash homes, where we can walk in and switch on. Flick a switch and the light comes on, and we can have all these conversations with people around us. We forget that there are lots of other people that don't get that. And we really got to appreciate what we have and be grateful.
You have a beautiful heart, Ronsley. So nice. And now you're reaching even more people through your Bond Appetit podcast. So tell me about Bond Appetit, the podcast.
Well, Bond Appetit, the podcast started because when I was thinking about the business, and I was going, well, I'm cooking for all these high performing individuals. What about the people that really want to make changes to their life, and they want to get healthy? They want to know what food is good for them. How do I get to them? And I stumbled upon a podcast, and I stumbled upon obviously Tim Reed. I used to listen to Tim Reed. I used to listen to a few of his podcasts. I used to listen to Michael O'Neill, and I got a chance to really get to know Michael. We became really good friends, and he's like, dude, you really should start a podcast. And as a result of that, I started Bond Appetit. The idea was to interview the high-performing individuals and the chefs and the nutritionists and people that were doing or fighting the good fight, so to speak. And set that example for the people that were listening, so that they could get a better idea of what is really good for them and their families.
And then you've taken it to another level as well, because Bond Appetit is way up there in the what's hot in iTunes. I see it up there all the time, which is great. And now you've become a podcast trainer as well with your other podcast called Podcast Revolution.
Yes.
Ronsley, is there anything that you don't get into?
I got shiny ball syndrome. I can't help it. It is an issue. It is an issue. I have to say. Well, as a result of Bon Appetit, because Bon Appetit got featured on iTunes, it got featured everywhere on iTunes in the front page, on the banner section next to Triple J and ABC Radio. We were there for like 5 months and got a lot of traction. At the time, I think we were getting between 4,000 and 5,000 listeners a day. And I had a lot of people say, well, can you help us do the same thing? And I went, here you can have all my notes. And I don't know whether your listeners know Key Person of Influence, but knowing the Key Person of Influence community, they were like, I don't want your notes. I want you to charge me to help me create my podcast. And I went, oh, right. So here's another thing I'm going to get into. So I created a product called Broadcast Your Message. I wasn't going to mention it, but I landed up doing it anyway. And it was primarily 7 steps on how to create your podcast, how to leverage it, how to engage your audience, how to grow it, and how to make sure that you are visible on iTunes, and how to get the most traction from that.
Wonderful. And it just sounds like everything that you've done in your career has led you to this today, because obviously you need to have that technical background as well. You need to financially be pretty savvy in order to be able to run your businesses. Then because of your love of food, it's brought you chilies and coconut and wonderful things. And then you noticed how children are not eating healthily. And I mean, everything's just snowballing, Ronsley. It's fascinating what you've got now. And so now, if people want to find you, first of all, to listen to Bond Appetit and find out more about food and healthy eating, where would they find you?
Food, the best place is to just Google Bond, Bond Appetit, Appetit, or bond-appetit.com. All the podcasts, everything we do is there. To connect with me, Twitter is probably the best place, at Ronsley, or even on Facebook. I mean, I'm happy to. I'm sure you have some friendly fans, Jane. So facebook.com/Ronsley is where you'll find me.
I'll make sure only my friendly fans contact you. And especially if they've got some good pictures of food. I'm going to start taking more pictures of food and sending them to you as well.
Love that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, wonderful. So, and we can listen to you on iTunes, Bond Appetit, the podcast, as well as Podcast Revolution on iTunes, which is also doing fabulously well because it's still way up there on New and Noteworthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure that when it drops off New and Noteworthy, it'll be in the What's Hot section right away.
Well, Podcast Revolution was or is an experiment. I did a lot of things right with Bond Appetit, and what I'm trying to do with Podcast Revolution is tweak a few things to see what the impact is, and I'm finding that I did better with Bond Appetit, to be honest.
Yeah, why do you think that was the difference?
When I launched Podcast Revolution, I launched with one episode a week, and it was an experiment to see what traction I could get. With Bond Appetit, I launched with 3 episodes a week, and that just went through the roof. Podcast Revolution has taken a bit of time, and if I did launch Podcast Revolution with 3 a week, I would have got way more traction. I know that.
Actually, you're right. When it comes to podcasts, because I love listening to podcasts as well, the ones that only come out once a week, I find it's too long in between. And so if I'm looking for other podcasts, then I'll go and listen to something else. And the original podcast that I was hoping to hear more of might lose me as a listener as well. So yeah, 3 times a week is I think that's a really good idea. A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed John Lee Dumas, the entrepreneur on fire, and he had that fabulous idea of having a podcast every day, 7 days a week, and that's just gone through the roof. It's amazing.
John's funny. He's so funny. I keep asking him this question that I'm like, John, are you really ready to ignite all the time? Like, what's the deal, dude? Like, and are you just fed up of hearing everything's on fire? Like, well, what's the goal? But, I mean, as you might be able to tell after chatting with him, he is totally ready to ignite every single second.
Yeah, so much
that's
enthusiasm.
Just him,
I mean, his enthusiasm and also his willingness to also give back, very much like you, because you're so much about the community as well, and being able to teach or train or advise others so that they can also be successful. I think it's a really, really wonderful thing. And so, Ronsley, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. You are such an interesting guy, definitely a rebel entrepreneur with all your multiple businesses and a fantastic career history, which actually is testimony to anyone and my listeners and also my clients too, who are stressing about career change, because so often when someone goes through high school and then through uni and they're deciding on their courses that they should take, and they're so worried about making a mistake in their career and, will that ruin my career for good? Most people go through between 5 and 10 career changes in their lives anyway. I think as long as you keep a really open mind and stay curious and keep learning, there's always something new, and Ronsley Vaz is someone who's definitely shown us that.
It's not always sunshine and rainbows, but it is definitely something that you should keep trying. I mean, if you're in Australia or any first world country in particular, there's no reason not to try something that you love. Just always do what you love, and everything else will just be blur the lines between work and play is what I reckon.
Yeah, and I always think that as long as what you're doing, you love it, it's going to be fun. And if it's not fun, then why are we doing it?
True.
Yeah, that's lovely. Well, thank you so much, Ronsley, for your time today. It really has been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope that I'll be able to get you back on the show for more foodie talk in a few weeks' time. And I just need to mention that Ronsley is organising the very first podcasting conference in the Southern Hemisphere this year. It's going to be called We Are Podcast and will be held on November the 7th and 8th on the Gold Coast. So if you're interested in attending this podcast conference, go to wearepodcast.com for all of the information.
Love it, Jane. Love what you do. Congratulations on the podcast.
Thank you.
You're killing it on iTunes. And thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks, Ronsley. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Jane Jackson Careers. Sign up to receive regular career advice at janejacksoncoach.com.